In the year 1999, J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett, both 17 years old, were close friends. They were about to graduate as seniors from Dothan, Alabama's Northview High School. On 31st of July 1999, the girls from Dothan, Alabama decided to make a trip to Headland for J.B.'s birthday party. Around 10 o'clock at night, they got into J.B.'s 1993 black Mazda and drove off. However, they eventually got lost in Ozark, which is about 20 miles far from their home. The girls were unsure of where to go, so they stopped at a gasoline station at roughly 10:30 p.m. to ask for directions. They also made use of the payphone at the gas station, and after talking to some pals, they seemed to have figured out where they needed to go. Yet an hour had passed, and they were still lost and a long way from where the celebration was supposed to take place. They then stopped again, this time at another shop with a payphone. After that, Tracie contacted Carol Roberts, her mom, to let her know that they'd been lost. She also said that they were now leaving for home. Tragically, Carol never saw or heard from her daughter and her best friend ever again. Around 5 in the morning the following day, Carol realized that her daughter was still not back. The fact that Tracie was barely ever late let her know that something was off. When Tracie hadn't turned up by 8 o'clock, Carol dialed the Dothan Police Department and reported her missing. On the same day, authorities located J.B.'s vehicle. It was parked on Herring Avenue in Ozark with an empty fuel tank, even though it had been refilled the day before. The car's doors were unlocked, and the driver's side window was slightly lowered down by a few inches. Thanks to a handprint retrieved from the top of the trunk, authorities were able to piece together what might have transpired. When the police lifted the trunk, J.B. and Tracie's bodies were inside. They both had died from gunshot wounds. The two youngsters were dressed, yet oddly unclean. Semen was collected from the crime site, allowing detectives to acquire a DNA sample belonging to the culprit. The fact that both girls' handbags and belongings were still there allowed the investigators to rule out burglary as a potential explanation. J.B.'s keychain, which included the car keys, was the sole item that was missing. Whether J.B. and Tracie were murdered within the trunk or elsewhere remained a mystery to detectives. 1 month after the girls' bodies were found, on September 1, 1999, a guy by the name of Johnny William Barentine walked into the Ozark PD to testify about what he believed to have happened to the girls. On July 31, 1999, he claimed to have gone to the grocery shop to buy milk for his 2-year-old son. Around the same time, Tracie called her mother from the Big Little store. Near Herring Avenue, on his way back home, his car was struck by a black truck with built-in license plates. He claimed that he saw the truck flee the crime site swiftly where the girls' bodies were found. Johnny gave more than 5 different versions of his statement during the 4 hours that the investigators had interrogated him. At one time, Johnny even placed himself at the crime scene. Given his inconsistent assertions, the authorities eventually charged him with 2 murders. Johnny received the death penalty. He kept proclaiming his innocence and stated he had only made up his assertions in order to receive the reward cash. In 2000, the grand jury declined to file an indictment against Johnny. He was no longer considered a suspect after it was found that his DNA did not match the semen sample found at the crime scene. Even though several more leads over the years proved to be untrue, the investigators never gave up on their search for finding a positive match. Over the years, the authorities have investigated a large number of suspects. They obtained samples of DNA from many people and performed hundreds of interviews. However, they remained unsuccessful. When the girls' 20th anniversary came near, detectives chose to take a fresh look at the case. In March 2019, they uploaded the evidence from the crime scene to a public genealogical database, and shortly after, they received a match. Soon after, authorities announced that 45-year-old Coley Lewis McCraney have been arrested. Being a resident of Dothan throughout his life, McCraney was accused of 5 counts of capital murder and 1 act of first-degree rape. The results of the investigation shocked both the locals and Marlos Walker, the current chief of the Ozark Police Department. Chief Walker, in fact, attended school with McCraney. It was difficult for them to accept that he could be the one responsible for such a heinous act. Back in 1999, McCraney would have been 25 years old, separated from his first spouse, and was involved in an ongoing paternity case. The irony is that the judge had actually ordered him to submit DNA sample the day before the homicides. Records indicate that he never complied with the instruction. Throughout the initial 1999 investigation, McCraney was never apprehended and wasn't even regarded as a suspect. In 2001, he remarried, and at the time of his incarceration, he was apparently serving the Lord as a bishop and motivational speaker. Coley McCraney, who is currently 49 years old, was given a life sentence without the possibility of release following his trial in April 2023. In 1998, 40-year-old Julie Carol Jensen resided in Pleasant Prairie, Wisconsin. She shared a home with her husband, Mark Jensen, and their 2 kids. Julie and Mark met in 1981 when she was employed at a Sears department store in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. They both attended the University of Wisconsin-Parkside in Kenosha as undergraduates. The couple moved to Carroll Beach neighborhood of Pleasant Prairie, Wisconsin, and had 2 children, David and Douglas. By 1998, Julie was working part-time for the Port Authority in Chicago, while Mark was working as a branch manager for a St. Louis-based financial institution in Racine, Wisconsin. On December 3, 1998, Mark contacted the authorities and reported that Julie had passed away in her sleep. Upon medical examination of the body, traces of ethylene glycol were found in her bloodstream. Ethylene glycol is a toxin present in antifreeze. It cannot be easily detected. Investigators subsequently discovered a letter that Julie had written prior to her demise, which said thus: "I took this picture, and I am writing this on Saturday, November 21st, 1998, around 7 a.m. In my husband's everyday business planner, there was this list, not intended for my viewing. I'm not sure what that means, but if anything was to happen to me, my first suspicion would be him. Our relationship has fallen apart to the point where it's just superficial. I'm certain that he never forgave me for the brief affair I had 7 years ago with that creep. Mark is devoted to his work and the kids. He is an enthusiastic internet surfer. Anyway, I do not smoke or drink. Since my mother was an alcoholic, I reduced my drinking to once or twice a week. Mark prefers that I drink more with him during the evenings, but not me. Because of my children, I would never consider suicide. To me, they are everything. I take multivitamins and Tylenol on a regular basis. Occasionally, Zantac or Imodium over-the-counter stuff for colds, and I have one prescription for migraine pills, which Mark uses more often than I do. I hope I'm mistaken and nothing comes of it. However, I fear my early death and am skeptical of Mark's suspicious behavior. Yet, I will not abandon David and Douglas, my life's greatest love, accomplishment, and wish, my 3 Ds, Daddy, David, and Douglas. Julie's relatives and loved ones remember her sweet, carefree, and easygoing demeanor. She was regarded as kind, caring, and sincere, having a modest personality who enjoyed spending time with others. Over the next decade, detectives worked to develop a solid case against Mark Jensen. That led to a protracted trial. In 2008, Special Prosecutor Robert Jambois alleged that on December 3, 1998, Mark Jensen poisoned his wife with ethylene glycol and then suffocated her in their marital bed when she was barely breathing. Defense attorney Craig Albee contended that Julie Jensen was a depressed woman who took her own life and set up her husband as the murderer. In addition, Julie had visited a therapist due to her depression at least 3 times. The evidence presented demonstrated that Mark Jensen had discussed about poisoning his wife with colleagues and a prison fellow. Upon the inspection of his personal computer, it was discovered that he had looked up information online regarding the poison. Julie's letter played a pivotal role in the trial, which concluded on February 22, 2008. Following over 30 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted 48-year-old Mark Jensen guilty. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. On December 9, 2013, a federal judge overturned Jensen's conviction and mandated his 90-day jail release. The court agreed with Jensen's contention that the state's use of his deceased wife's statements violated his constitutional right to confront witnesses against him. On January 9, 2023, Mark Jensen, age 63, stood for trial a second time. He was found guilty on February 1, 2023. Mark Jensen, who is now facing life in prison, will be sentenced on April 14, 2023. He remained expressionless while the verdict was announced. An executive from a Californian tech firm faces charges related to the 1992 killing of his ex-roommate's girlfriend. Laurie Houts, a 25-year-old software engineer, was discovered murdered in her car at Mountain View. The CEO and president of ReadyTech, John Kevin Woodward, was subsequently accused of taking her life. According to the district attorney's office in Santa Clara County, Woodward, who is currently 58 years old, was apprehended at the John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York in July of 2022 after coming back from Amsterdam. As per the police report, Houts' lifeless body was found inside her car next to a landfill, approximately a mile from her workplace. Her footprints were visible on the inner side of the car's windscreen, implying signs of struggle against the alleged suspect. The rope that was used to strangle her was still around her neck. Nearby, her pocketbook was discovered, untouched. Later that year, Woodward, who shared a room with Houts' boyfriend, was taken into custody in relation to the murder. The Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office stated that Woodward had no alibi for the evening Houts was slain and was openly resentful of Houts. Additionally, he harbored unsatisfied feelings for his roommate. While authorities were listening, the roommate confronted Woodward about whether he killed her, in response to which, Woodward inquired about what the detectives knew. Even though Woodward had left his fingerprints on Houts' vehicle, the police in 1992 remained futile in their attempts to prove Woodward had been inside the vehicle that night. For the alleged offense, he stood trial twice. The first trial concluded in a hung jury, and so did the second trial, that took place about a year after. The trial judge stated during the second trial that more evidence needed to be presented in order to have a retrial. Following the second trial, Woodward moved to the Netherlands, where he presently makes his home. With the help of more evidence and advancements in DNA technology, investigators were able to link Woodward to the rope used to commit the crime. In the latter part of 2020, investigators began re-examining the Houts case, resubmitting stuff that was gathered during the investigation to the Santa Clara County Crime Lab for additional testing. Later, the results came back. According to the police, DNA samples taken from the scene's evidence matched Woodward's DNA. The Santa Clara County Sheriff's Identification Unit also revisited more than 80 latent fingerprints that had been taken at the time of Laurie's death, and the results showed that even more fingerprints matched Woodward. In response to the newly acquired data and evidence, the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office issued a new warrant for Woodward's arrest on charges of murder that resulted in Woodward having been indicted and prosecuted as the primary suspect during the initial investigation. Mountain View Police Chief Chris Hseung mentioned in a statement, "This case is the culmination of remarkable tenacity by our investigators throughout the decades, along with phenomenal cooperation with our agency partners here in Santa Clara County and in New York. It is an honor for me that our organization can now at last provide Laurie's family hope that their case will result in an effective prosecution. It is important to emphasize that we will always pursue justice for victims no matter what." Woodward is detained in New York without being eligible for bail until his extradition back to California. If found guilty, he might spend the rest of his life behind bars. Jeff Rosen, the district attorney, expressed gratitude for the U.S. Department of Justice's and the Dutch Ministry of Justice and Security's involvement and support, In coordination with the DOJ, Dutch officials were able to secure a search warrant for Woodward's Netherlands residence and workplace. He claimed to have confiscated many computers and USB drives within less than a day. A 70-year-old mysterious case has finally been solved with the help of DNA testing via the family history database website, Ancestry.com. As Stephanie Mickham of the LaGrange County Sheriff's Office stated, "Telling people like Floyd and Mary that we've closed the case is probably one of the most biggest achievements of my life. Floyd and Mary are two of living children of Ralph Stutzman, who was a LaGrange County farmer, last seen on August 17, 1952. They attended a public statement together with about 20 family members and friends, as well as many more residing in Florida, of whom they were unfamiliar with, who joined through a Zoom meeting at the LCSD on Friday afternoon to formally close their father's unsolved case. Ralph Stutzman of LaGrange County was reported as missing from his residence on the 17th of August, 1952. According to Mickham, the family was within their home, and Mr. Stutzman was thought to be inside the barn at the time. Around that moment, he went missing. At the time of his disappearance, Stutzman was 47 years old, married, and had 13 children, 12 alive and 1 deceased. He owned a farm. In April 2022, genealogist Randy Davis received a call from a relative who had been trying to find her parents. Using the Ancestry's DNA analysis system, she discovered that she was a match to both the Schrock family in Florida and the Stutzman family in LaGrange. He approached the LaGrange County Sheriff's Office on September 27, 2022, to inform them that they might have just solved a case of a missing person that was reported 7 decades before. The lady, named Crystal, thought she was descended from Ralph Stutzman, who went missing in LaGrange County in the year 1952. Nevertheless, a DNA test revealed that her grandfather, named Delbert Schrock, was actually the father of a woman that goes by Ruth in Ocala, Florida. Likewise, Stutzman's daughter, Mary, was asked by the department to provide her DNA. Mickham stated it made the direct connection to Ruth Hackney, who would ultimately be Mary Stutzman Boyd's sister. It turned out that Ralph Stutzman had relocated to Florida at some point and adopted the name Delbert Schrock. There, he started a second family and gave birth to 6 more kids before passing away in Florida in 1968. That family was clueless of their Delbert being a missing person before they were approached by the authorities. I was kind of taken aback by that, as I had no idea of anything like that, stated John Schrock, a grandson from Florida. It's a little strange because my family's growing up as big as it is down here. It's even bigger up there, so I hope to meet them all someday. Mary Stutzman Boyd, who is now 92 years old, is still alive but have trouble with memory. Her son Ben Boyd, another grandson of Stutzman, stated, although he's not sure if his mother will completely grasp what has happened, the rest of the family members would surely do. She had been saying for many, many years that she wanted to know about what happened to her father before she passed away. According to Boyd, I believe that knowing what actually happened to him, and knowing that he isn't just lying in a ditch someplace, decaying, is a relief to the entire family. Boyd recalls the rumors that circulated when Stutzman went missing in the 1950s, yet he couldn't really understand the situation because he was just 5 years old at the time. Rather, he recalls playing with his youngest uncle Don, who was only 9 months older than him. Even though the family is still in the dark about Stutzman's departure, they have already started developing a bond and are planning for a family reunion. Those conversations even went on during the press conference when Floyd Fuzz Stutzman, the son of Stutzman, heard his nephew John Schrock from Ocala talk for the first time through Zoom. Every individual who had contributed in this case, we cannot thank them enough, Boyd claimed. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Detective Stephanie Mickham and the Sheriff's Department. In February 1988, at the age of 24, Petra Nohl was a gorgeous blonde, who had recently separated from her spouse. She lived in the German town of Cologne with her parents and one-year-old child. It had been a few months now since she became single. She was characterized as an attractive young mother and a cheerful, carefree woman. On February 13, 1988, a Saturday night, Petra was headed to the Cologne Carnival. Cologne, the oldest city in Rhine-Westphalia, Germany, is nearly 2,000 years old. Since ancient times, folks have been celebrating the carnival, which generally takes place in the second week of February. It turns Cologne, a quiet town, into a party hub with celebrations all over the place. This festival surpasses all other festivals. The costumes are not even focused on a theme or look. Rather, they serve mostly to keep a person warm and exhibit the enthusiasm of the festival. Plenty of drinking, dancing, and music are all present. The whole week is dedicated to the Crazy Days, which corresponds to the 7 days of celebrations. Speaking of which, it was finally time for Petra to relax herself. She went out for the entire evening partying at the place known as Beer Village with 2 of her friends. The majority of the trio's time was spent at Charivari, a well-known disco. The girls were having a blast until Petra became bored. Despite her suggestion that they go to another party at a different restaurant, her buddies declined to. She didn't bring a car, they were her ride. Then, at around 4 a.m., Petra Nohl borrowed 100 Deutschmarks from a friend with the intention of going to another party by herself, but she was never able to make it to there. As she was on her way to there, someone brutally took her life. Petra was ambushed, battered, and finally strangled by an unidentified assailant about 600 meters from the club on Alberto Strasse. The incident took place in front of a beer stand, which was actually a food truck that had been placed in preparation of the Sunday Carnival parade. While everything was being set up for the parade, her lifeless body was concealed beneath the truck. The body, dressed in a jacket and fishnet stockings, was lying underneath the potato pancake cart that also served beer. Petra's body remained hidden from the site by just a few meters until a nearby local resident noticed it. The body was found by a 23-year-old lady while out for a stroll with her dog. It was then Sunday, February 14th, Valentine's Day for many, but a dreadful start of the day for Petra's family. Photos taken at the time depict bizarre sightings. Hours following the incident, carnival participants wandered through the murder site in their costumes, as police officers in their white overalls behind a grill and tape collected evidence. Officer Volker Langer, the police officer in charge of that section of the road at the time, cautioned the spectators that they were not permitted within that area. Although the reason behind this heinous deed is still unknown, it appeared to be a mugging gone wrong, because the culprit fled with Petra Nohl's handbag. Days went by as the investigators kept working, and Petra's case was eventually deemed as unsolved. After over 34 years, the case was revived in collaboration with the North Rhine-Westphalia State Criminal Police Office's Special Organization for Cold Cases Unit, called BAO. Its goal was to employ cutting-edge technology to solve unsolved cases while coordinating directly with the district police authorities. When the investigation was reopened, one of the staff members recommended a DNA analysis among other things. Upon re-examining the case, one of the specialists recommended a new molecular genetic analysis and a public inquiry, which ultimately yielded a suspect. Petra's case was highlighted on file number XY Unsolved, a German television program. On December 7, 2022, this program, which examines unresolved criminal cases, featured the Petra Nohl cold case. One man was deeply influenced by the episode. Even though it had been more than 30 years, he was confident of his memories, which led him to tell the police about his long-suppressed suspicions. The man remembered going to the disco club Charivari with his friend Norbert K. to celebrate the carnival. Suspects' last names are kept secret in Germany so as to prevent their families from being recognized or subjected to harassment. He recalled witnessing the blonde-haired girl and how Norbert was staring at her. considering they hadn't brought a car with them that evening. They left at 4 a.m. to wait for a cab at a taxi stop. It was then that they noticed her once more, standing by for a ride. This late, none of the three of them could find a cab, so they began to part ways. He headed in one direction, and Petra and his friend Norbert headed in the other. The following day, he noticed Norbert had a different hairstyle. Everything else was like usual until they watched the news and saw the girl from the taxi stand. Norbert persuaded his friend not to report anything to the police, claiming their statement would be pointless. Since they were both young, their understanding of law was limited. At the time, Norbert was approximately 21 years old, and the informant was in his teens. They refrained from disclosing any information about what transpired that evening. The two friends lost contact over the years, but when the now 54-year-old witnessed the episode, he felt compelled to speak up. The Cologne District Court issued an arrest warrant for Norbert K. By the time all these years had passed, 56-year-old Norbert K. was settled, married, and even had kids. The unemployed construction worker was a devoted parent to two grown children, an adult daughter, and a foster child. Very few of his neighbors had any complaints against him. It was unexpected when police showed up at his house, but they had probable cause because Norbert's DNA matched that of the sample taken from Petra's body. Remarkably, Norbert responded to the accusations with composure, claiming he was unaware of Petra's case and couldn't recall seeing her face. In addition, he had no criminal convictions, not even a speeding ticket. Natalie Nohl, Petra Nohl's daughter, confronted him in court. Natalie was just 20 months old when her mother was stolen from her. The fact that the man has been living here for so long astounds me. I always believed that it was someone from outside who came to Cologne specifically for the carnival. Natalie, 35, has now learned the name and face of the guy who took her mother away. Defense attorneys Mark Peel and Uwe Kreschel asserted that they are certain of their client's innocence. They are skeptical that the DNA evidence will establish his guilt. Since the two are in a disco, dancing might have easily caused the traces that were discovered on the jacket's sleeves. Had DNA transfer occurred on a regular basis at the carnival or disco, Petra Nohl's clothing would have been smeared with the traces from scores of people. Thereafter, the detectives would have a pool of DNA samples, and it would remain unknown whether the DNA was obtained at the crime site or while at the disco. But according to the witness testimony, Petra only had Norbert K.'s DNA. Therefore, there is still a lot to accuse him of. The fact that DNA was only discovered on the clothes is not strange, as the crime was unrelated to any sort of physical abuse or assault. The order of the traces implies a fighting stance instead of partying in a disco. On Monday, September 4th, 2023, the trial began, and Norbert entered a not guilty plea. At the trial on November 11, 2023, Norbert was further implicated when it came to light that his DNA was also discovered inside of Petra's tights. Although the trial's verdict has not yet been made public, it is anticipated that Norbert would be found guilty on all charges brought against him. If you find this video compelling, show your support by giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel, and ringing that notification bell. By doing so, you'll stay updated about the latest investigations and mysteries. Your support means the world to us as we continue to pursue the truth in the world of unsolved cases.